Welcome back to the channel. I'm RJ Ronquillo, and if you're new here, thanks for joining me. I'm super excited to show you guys the brand new Stories Collection Eric Johnson 1954 Virginia Stratocaster by Fender. I've been a fan of Eric's since I saw him on the Austin City Limits TV show back in 1988. And while he's had various signature Stratocasters with Fender since 2005, I'd never really been interested in getting one until I saw this one. And it's because it has some really cool little details that I'm gonna share with you in this video. But before we get started, if you're into these kinds of videos, make sure you click the subscribe button and hit the bell icon to stay notified of all my new videos and whenever I go live. So I was first attracted to this guitar after watching Eric talk about some of the details and features and unique specs on the Sweetwater and Fender videos, and I'll link down to them in the description. Now this one is the production model, which is made in Corona, California, but they also offer a limited run custom shop version, which has the exact same specs as I'm going to talk about today, plus a really amazing 4A flamed maple neck and a deluxe closet classic finish package performed by master builder Carlos Lopez. Now, if you're wondering why it's named Virginia, it's because Eric's original 1954 Stratocaster that he's played on all of his early records and all of his hits had a piece of masking tape inside of the pickguard signed by a woman named Virginia, who was one of 4 women at Fender that actually did all of the final assemblies of all the instruments back in the early 50s. And incidentally, if you do get that custom shop version, they do put a piece of masking tape signed by a Virginia inside the pickguard, which I think is a really cool little treat. So starting with the first little detail that caught my attention, if you notice on the tremolo, there is one saddle that's different than all the rest of the saddles. And there's a reason for that. So according to Eric, the reason for the different first string saddle is to tame the sharp, trebly sound of the high E string when you're on the bridge pickup and you've got a little bit of gain. It's to even out the sound so it matches up better with the other unwound strings, the B and the G string. So back in the day, I think he had put on like a 70s saddle with a piece of like Delrin plastic, maybe from a pick or something, on top so that the string would go over, and that would kind of tame down the highs. I have a couple of vintage style Strats, and I totally get what he's saying, that sometimes the high E string, when you're up high, you know, past the 12th fret, they can get a little bit thin and bright and a little bit piercing. So what Fender did on this new model is they put a Graphtec String Saver Classic saddle, which is basically like a modern Fender style tremolo saddle, but with a graphite insert. And that graphite piece actually rolls off the highs a little bit. Plus, it's graphite, so you're probably not gonna break a string anytime soon, which is always a plus. But other than that, it's your classic 6-screw vintage style tremolo. I do believe he puts 5 springs in the back. If I recall correctly, his previous signature guitars didn't come with a back plate or screw holes, but this one actually does. So this might be more correct to the original Virginia. Another interesting and very unique feature of this guitar are the pickups and the wiring. The bridge pickup is actually a DiMarzio HS2. And this is a very unique pickup. This was the pickup he had in his guitar when he recorded Tones and Avia Musicom. So it definitely has his signature sound in it. But what I learned about this pickup is this pickup was first produced in the early 80s by DiMarzio and was one of the first single coil sized humbuckers. But one of the cool things about this pickup is you can wire it either as a humbucker, because there's 2 coils on top of each other, or you can actually wire just as a single coil, which is what Eric did. Like I said, there's stacked coils in it, and just by using the topmost coil, it acts in single coil mode. But even in single coil mode, it's actually a little bit hotter than a normal vintage Strat pickup. I've also noticed that there's a little bit less hum than on a standard vintage Stratocaster pickup. It's cool because you're still getting that vintage Strat style tone with a little bit of modernization. The volume pot on a Stratocaster is usually a 250K volume pot, but on here and on his original Virginia, he put a not quite 500K pot to compensate for the different pickups. I say not quite 500K because from my understanding is they kind of seeked out pots that were closer to 400K because that was what was in his original Virginia Strat. So this, I believe, is somewhere between 400 and 500K, which is pretty unique to me. Previous Eric Johnson models used custom wound Fender pickups as a set. So the fact that they're using a DiMarzio model, the one that Eric used on all those classic recordings, in this new guitar is pretty cool. As far as the other pickups, these are the Fender wound 57/62 pickups. This particular pickup was reverse engineered from a 1963 Stratocaster. It's got Alnico 5 magnets and Formvar wire. Another interesting feature is, and when you first play this, you might think the electronics are broken, but in position 4, which is neck and middle pickups, they're intentionally wired out of phase, and I believe it was kind of an accident back in the day, but Eric Johnson just kept it because he liked that thin, out of phase sound, which led him to develop this kind of coda technique that he does. And he also says it kind of reminds him of that out of phase Peter Green early Fleetwood Mac sound, which I personally love. So the body itself is pretty unique. It's made out of sassafras wood, which I haven't really heard about sassafras wood being common with guitar bodies, but apparently early on, there's a couple pieces of sassafras that went through the production line, and I believe Eric stated that there's something magical about the sassafras wood compared to, ash or alder. He says, and I quote, a little more headroom, or like a higher resolution 4K TV. But for me, playing this guitar and comparing it to my other Stratocasters, this really feels like a really even piece of wood. The tone is really even. It's a pretty hefty piece of wood. It's not super light, but it does have a little bit of weight to it. The body is actually a 2-piece quarter-sawn offset seam. You can actually see that the seam is right around here. So there's one piece here, and then there's another piece like right around here, which is pretty interesting. You can't really tell from afar, but when you look at it really close and look at the grain, you can see where the line is. So moving on from the body and going to the neck, another feature that I was kind of surprised about was the 12-inch radius. So, you know, growing up, I saw Eric playing that old 54 Stratocaster. I was so blown away that he was able to be that agile using a vintage guitar with what I assumed was a vintage fingerboard, you know, a 7 1/4 fingerboard, which is pretty round and it's hard to shred on one of those types of fingerboards. But little did I know he actually had his original fingerboard on his 54 Strat shaved down to a 12-inch radius. And now that makes total sense to me, and it's super, super comfortable and way more shreddier than a vintage radius fingerboard. If I could describe the neck to you, it's definitely on the thick side. It's got this soft V contour on the back that you can really feel down here in the 3rd fret. It's super comfortable to me, but it is on the thick side, which I believe his other Strat models that he came out with were kind of on the thicker side. This is a 1-piece quarter-sawn maple neck, also shot in nitrocellulose lacquer. There's also a cool little feature that I don't think is really detailed on the Fender website, but I heard Eric talking about it. If you look at the nut, the high E string is maybe 1 millimeter or 2 cut inwards. And the reason for that, I think Eric said, is to give it a little bit more play so you're not slipping off the edge of the fingerboard this way, which I think I might do on all of my Strats. I think just that little millimeter or 2 inwards on the nut makes this a little more comfortable to play. And I think Eric is all about, you know, tweaking his guitars to make them comfortable and performing their best. You know, as much as I love Stratocasters, the actual design, which hasn't changed since, you know, 53, 54, that much at least, it's a little bit rough. What Eric has been doing over the years, I guess, has been modifying them to suit his playing. You know, everything from changing the saddle on the 1st string to cutting the nut in a way where it pushes the string a little bit inward off the edge of the fretboard. That's just super cool little details that, you know, add up to make a perfect guitar. And I'm gonna say, like, I own, gosh, probably 5 Strats, and this is becoming one of my favorites because of its playability. Obviously because it sounds amazing, but the playability and those little details really make a difference to me. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want more information on this guitar, link in the description. If you enjoyed your time with me today, click that thumbs up. If you have any comments or questions, leave them down below. Be sure to share it with your friends, family, someone who's seen the original Zap video. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, gear demos or guitar lessons, click that subscribe button. Thanks again for watching. I'm RJ Ronquillo, and I'll see you in the next video.